Welcome back, dickhead. Today we're gonna be looking at what do the orcs think of every other faction in Warhammer 40k. I can't fucking read. Let's get started.
That I just made up, there isn't a single 40k fan in existence that doesn't love the orcs. If they say they don't, they're either lying or they hate fun. And if that's you, who hurt you? Now, part of the charm of 40k as a franchise is how bleak, dark, and comically serious it often takes itself. But right when it's all starting to feel a little too depressing, the orcs come in like a giant green wrecking ball, ready to inject some much needed humor into the grimdark.
That's what I like, man. I love humor. I love it. And I got flamed. I got flamed for that, actually. I read the comments. Fuck you.
Future. And what's not to love about these guys? They're a bunch of cockney football hooligans. They don't care about taking territory. They're not trying to build some grand empire. They don't even have an agenda to push. The only thing the orcs care about...
They don't even have a fucking agenda, bro. I hope you guys have seen that video where they're like, what's your agenda? Male or female? I hope you've seen it.
Is fighting. And in their pursuit of getting into ever more crazy scraps, they've spread to every corner of the galaxy in order to give all of the other factions a, quote, proper kicking. But what do the orcs think of all those other factions? Do they think they're a bunch of weaklings and cowards, or do they have a lot of admiration for groups that can hold their own in a fight? Do they look at a species like, say, the Tau, who specialize in ranged warfare, as a bunch of cowards, or do they appreciate their taste in Daka? What are their thoughts on factions like the Necrons, the Aeldari, the Tyranids, Chaos, or the Imperium? Which ones do they like fighting against the most? And dare I say it, have any of them actually managed to earn the orcs' respect?
Okay, my guess, before we go further, because they love fighting, they would probably have a lot of respect for factions that are able to keep up with them and that are able to give them a good fight, not ones that fucking flop over easily. That's my guess, based off of what I know about them. Yeah, I would say they have respect for the ones that can fight, probably.
What about some of the gods in this universe, like Khorne or the Emperor? Do they respect them as avatars of war, or think they're a bunch of wimps waiting to get pasted by Gork and Mork? We're gonna get into all that and a whole lot more in this video, as I had nothing to do but research this one for the last week after catching COVID at a Magic the Gathering event.
Because it was Magic the Gathering. Of course it was. I've still never had COVID, by the way. Like, I go out sometimes. I just haven't had it yet. I wasn't cool enough.
I know is an obvious thing to say now that I'm saying it out loud. It's like saying I caught the plague when I visited Nurgle's garden. It's like, what was I thinking? So yeah, sorry if I sound a little bit off in this one. I'm still kind of getting over it. But anyways, before we dive headfirst into the Grimdark, a quick shout out to this video's sponsor.
Me!
This video is sponsored by Warhammer 40,000
Yes!
Tacticus, a fast-paced and exciting turn-based tactical strategy game set in the grimdark future. The big news this month is that Tacticus is celebrating their 2-year anniversary. Not only do they have a ton of exclusive content lined up, including unique daily missions, offers, and rewards, but they're also introducing a brand new playable faction, the Exalted Ninth Legion.
My babies! I don't know if you know this. I have the biggest fucking heart for the Ninth Legion. They are the ones I have like so much love for based off of like their story. They are the ones I'm like, I want to join you. I will die for you guys. I am in. My babies.
Sons of Sanguinius, the Blood Angels, are finally being added to the game. Starting on August 4th, you'll be able to unlock the first Blood Angels champion.
Dude, okay, with that being said, spoilers for the future. I don't know if you guys know this or seen the video. I reacted to the speech with no context at all. And I did get flamed for that. But that's the point, because I'm going to be doing a second reaction with context. So if you have any recommendations to make sure that speech really fucking crushes my soul, feel free to let me know, because I want to fully cry from the start, not the end this time, from the start. So I'm so keen.
The Jump Pack Intercessor Sergeant Matt Teneo by participating in the weekly events. And then, starting on August 21st, there's going to be a 7-day Legendary Champion release event for the Lord of Death himself, Mephiston, Chief Librarian of the Blood Angels, and one of the most powerful Space Marines to have ever lived. My favorite thing about Tacticus is just how much there is to do. There's a ton of different game modes, including guild raids, multiple faction-specific campaigns, PvP arena battles, constant special events, and over 70 legendary Warhammer 40,000 champions to collect and battle with, from 16 playable factions, with new ones being added all of the time. With the 2-year anniversary event about to kick off, there's never been a better time to either come back to Tacticus or start playing for the first time. Click on my link in the description of this video to download and play the game for free today. A huge thank you to Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus for being such a long-time sponsor of this channel.
Let's go! Solid.
I probably don't need to tell you this, but Warhammer 40k can get pretty dark. The Milky Way galaxy of the 41st millennium is one where hatred and loathing have been allowed to fester and spread unchecked through the minds and hearts of nearly every spacefaring species. When we try to measure how they all feel about each other, it's ultimately an exercise in splitting hairs over who they each hate the most. But right at the moment we're about to give up hope that anybody could be having a good time in the grimdark future, we're introduced to everyone's favorite boys, the Orks, a bunch of obsessed Cockney hooligans who rampage across the galaxy looking for a good scrap to get.
This is like heaven for them. Global racism, yeah. No, this is heaven for them. They love war. They live for it. They love everything about it.
It's stuck in. If you know anything about 40k, I don't need to tell you just how amazing and hilarious they are, even if the people in universe absolutely hate them. They're like a hurricane of violence that carves a bloody path across the stars and kills anyone that gets in their way. But from our perspective, they seem to have a pretty good sense of humor about the whole thing.
I love humor. I love humor.
And their passion for fighting is pretty damn infectious. The funny thing about orcs is that all of the fighting they do isn't motivated by hatred for their enemies like
Isn't it just like they just love to fight? Like that's it. They love to fight.
most other species. In fact, hate is kind of a foreign emotion to the orcs. They have no concept of what it's like to hate something. Now sure, there's things they don't like much or maybe find annoying, but they have a simple and elegant solution for that. They just fight those things, which is what they love to do and thus what they assume everybody else in the universe loves as well. And speaking of fighting, it's pretty much the only thing that the orcs care about. You gotta remember that they were created 60 million years ago by the old ones as living weapons to fight against the Necrons. Every single aspect of them, all the way down to their genetics, was designed for combat. Fighting isn't just something they enjoy, it's everything to them. It is a biological need in much the same way that food or drink is for us. Because of this, the lens that the orcs view their galactic neighbors through is almost always framed by how good of a scrap they can give the boys. Now, what the orcs actually—
That's really interesting. I didn't really consider their perspective when it comes to like how they may see other people who are also partaking in war. Do they think that like, oh, we're on the same page, guys? Are they like, oh wow, you like fighting, so do I like you, let's fight.
actually think about all of the other species they routinely go up against is admittedly one of those topics that isn't nearly as fleshed out as it could be. Insight into orc philosophy used to be pretty rare until we started getting all of the Mike Brooks orc novels that were written from their perspective. So Brutal Cunning, War Boss, and Big Daka, as well as a bunch of short stories and the orc codexes, are going to serve as the primary sources for all of the information in this video. And because this script was made using sources almost exclusively written from their perspective, I'm gonna do honor to the orcs and use all of their preferred names for different factions. I'll explain as we go, but real quick, humans are known as humies, space marines are beakies, all Eldar are scrawnies or pansies in the older lore, and their dark Eldar variant is known as the spikies. Tau are fish heads or fish boys. Tyranids are bug eyes. Necrons, and pretty much all robots for that matter, are known as tin heads, tin boys, the tins, or the tinnies. Chaos Space Marines are the chaos lads with the spikes, and my personal favorite, demons are known as, quote, chaos griblies. We're going to kick things off with their thoughts on humies, as by far there's more information about their feelings on them than any other faction. And by examining how they view our species, we get a good framework of orc values that we can use to understand their relationship with chaos and other Xenos. You may be surprised to hear this, but the orcs are not particularly renowned for being especially—
They really said a slur for you, a slur for you, and a slur for you. Someone said they can, in one of the comments for the videos that I did, someone said they can imagine me as an orc.
Deep thinkers. A fun fact, one of the things that starts to happen to them as they grow bigger from surviving a ton of battles is that their brains start growing as well, and also start thinking a whole bunch more, which is something that the orcs find particularly annoying. Since the vast majority of them will get killed before they ever reach what we would consider smart, it shouldn't come as a surprise that they don't really take the time to observe all of the different nuances between Humi factions. The Sisters of Battle, the Astra Militarum, the Imperial Navy, it doesn't matter. They're all just Humies to the Orks. This extends
Humies!
to even factions that we as the audience would consider so radically different that they're almost a different species entirely, like the cyborg tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus, or even the friggin' Gene Stealer cults. The former is just the Humie equivalent of mech boys to the Orks, and the latter is a bunch of funny-looking Humies with too many arms. There is, of course, one major exception to this rule, and that's the Space Marines, or the Beakies as the Orks call them, due to the fact that the Mark VI Corvus pattern power armor looks kinda like a bird. The other most common variant of Space Marine armor
They're so simple-minded, I love it.
has a faceplate that the Orks think looks like an orc when he's straining too hard at the drums, which is their word for a latrine. Now that obviously doesn't make for a good nickname, so no matter what armor they're in, all Space Marines are Beakies. But we'll get into their thoughts on Space Marines later in this video. In multiple scenes throughout the Ork novels by Mike Brooks, and many codexes and campaign supplements from the last few decades, we get some direct quotes from the Orks that give us a lot more insight into their views here. From their perspective, Humies are kind of weird. They're fun to fight for reasons that we'll get into shortly, but culturally, they just do a lot of things that don't make any sense. Like, for example, one of the Orks' favorite pastimes other than fighting is looting. And when they end up stealing a Humie vehicle, their excitement of getting their hands on some new wheels is almost always soured by what they find inside. You see, Humies have this really annoying habit of putting all of the flashy buttons and lights on the inside of their vehicles, which, as every good orc knows, flashy gubbins are meant to go on the outside to show off to all the other boys. At least Humie vehicles
show off to all the other boys. Oh, they're so simple-minded. I love them so much.
have a good old-fashioned set of wheels or tracks that they ride around on, which is something that the Orks respect. But unfortunately, this isn't always the case. When they fight against the Admech, for example, or the Red Robes as they call them, their tanks float around like the vehicles of the Scrawnies, the Fishheads, the Tin Boys, and the Spikies. Now, some Orks believe this is why the Red Robes are so soft. If your ride isn't constantly being bombarded with bumps and shocks strong enough to compress your spine, you'll never be proper hard. Another thing that perplexes them about Humies and their trucks is that they all tend to drive on these big lines in the dirt called roads or bridges or some other stupid Humie word. They don't understand why they don't just drive wherever they want like the Orks do. Likewise, they have this hilariously weird habit of putting wheels on the doors inside of their ships and gargants, which, as every Ork knows, you can't drive a door. Yeah,
exactly. Fuck them. Dude, spiritually, I feel like Orks are the ones I connect with the most. I feel you, Orks. I feel you. And that is not a good thing.
But Humies just ain't logical. Humies also have this weird invention called an alarm system that's only purpose seems to be to get all of the Humies all riled up and scared before a fight. Why they would invent something like this is completely beyond them. Every self-respecting orc knows that before you get stuck in, you and the lads have to amp yourself up with some hooting, hollering, and a nice loud wah at the top of your lungs, not purposely induce feelings of fear and dread in you and all of your mates.
That is so interesting to think about because like I never thought about it from their perspective. Obviously, I don't just like wake up and go, oh yeah, let me see the world as an orc. Yeah. I don't do that, right? So seeing it from their perspective, what they think of like a warning systems and stuff like that. The fact they're like, yeah, that's fucking weird. Why would you scare yourself? That makes sense. I get scared of fire alarms.
Why they would make something like this, let alone put it on all of their buildings that contain all of their best
I'm so sorry, my dog dropped something. Oh wait, hold up, she wants to come up. I'm trying to get her to jump up. Okay, there we go. Good girl. Oh my gosh, she's trying to look at stuff on my desk. Thank you for the like, Jody. Oh no, you can't put your paw on the keyboard. Slow, calm down. Oh my god, that's amazing. All right, back to the video.
Loot is something that continues to vex the orcs to this day. Humies also love wasting time building things that don't seem to have any practical application.
Yeah, because buildings, what are they gonna do for war? If they don't fall over, we don't need them.
Like libraries, schools.
Yeah, fuck schools, fuck libraries.
Hospitals, or even cathedrals to some bloke named the God Emperor. Beings of logic like the orcs would never build anything that wasn't specifically going to be used in a fight. Weapons, armor, and even some of the weird mech boy inventions all had a purpose. But with Humies, 90% of what they made was practically worthless. At least when it came to their buildings, the Humies knew to make them real big. That was something that the orcs respected. It made it more fun to knock them over. Now, although Humie cathedrals are a bit much for the orcs, all of the statues depicting the Emperor is something that they can at least wrap their minds around. Although they've never seen him, Considering that he's normally depicted as being 100 feet tall with a giant flaming sword, he's clearly either the boss of all the Humies or their god. Either way, it would make sense to them that he told all of the smaller Humies to build all these things, and they have to listen to him because, again, he's the boss. Now, don't get it twisted, the god of the Humies in no way, shape, or form could stand up to true and proper gods like Gork and Mork. But so far as
Gork and Mork. I even love the names.
They can tell, if they ever manage to make it all the way to Terra and break into the Golden Throne, they're gonna get to fight a 100-foot tall Humie. So that's something
they would be so excited for that
all of the Orks are looking forward to.
Yeah.
Now, it makes sense to the Orks that the Emperor is in charge, because based on all of the artwork they've seen, he's the biggest. This is how the Orks do things. The biggest Ork is the boss. Not just because he's stronger than all of the other boys, but because Orks get bigger the more fights they get in. So a proper big Ork has a whole bunch of experience and thus makes for a better leader. But aside from the Emperor and the Beakies, all of the other Humies are the same size, so they're always arguing with each other about who's in charge. This is something the boys just don't really understand, and thus Humie hierarchy of command is still an enigma to them. What they think they should do is just fight it all out and figure out who's the biggest and strongest and make them the boss. But you gotta remember that Humies just ain't logical. They do things that don't make sense, and oftentimes it's better just not to think about it. Also, in their defense, Humies are pink or brown, fragile and soft.
Pink or brown. True.
Not tough and green like the boys. And
True.
as Uthak pointed out in Brutal Cunning, they die a lot easier as well. If all of the Humies started fighting each other, they'd all just be dead, and then there would be no Humies for the Orks to crump. They're too weak for that kind of thing. And since they clearly want to keep fighting the Orks, they assume that the Humies have had to make a few sacrifices in this department for the greater good of fighting. Now, Humies have a lot of faults, don't get it twisted. They do a lot of weird stuff that just doesn't make any sense, and they waste an enormous amount of time not fighting when they could spend time fighting.
Exactly, why spend time not fighting when you can just fucking fight, bro? Like, what the that makes no sense. Instead, the building shit? What? No, you don't even use half of it for war. What's even the point?
But even after all that, the Orks absolutely love them, even if they would never admit it out loud or even understand their affinity for them. And that's for two major reasons. One, even though they're not as good at fighting as the Orks, there's a lot of Humies. Now, we as the audience know that the Orks outnumber the Humies some 1,000 to 1, since they reproduce so quickly. But the Orks don't know this. From their perspective, it looks like Humies are everywhere. They can be found in every corner of the galaxy. And no matter how much time they spend fighting them, there's always more Humies. Every time you kill one, 10 more show up to take their place. And honestly, you couldn't ask for a better trait to have in an enemy. And two, although admittedly inferior to Ork technology, the tech that Humies make is easily a close second, especially when compared to the strange, esoteric machines utilized by other Xeno species. Humie weapons and armor are powerful, efficient, reliable, and most importantly, they look like what they're supposed to be. A gun looks like a gun, a sword looks like a sword, a tank looks like a tank. Now compare that.
Ron has a planet in the warp that has only Orks living on it because he loves watching them fight. He will resurrect them only to continue the fight. I feel like they would enjoy that though. Like I feel like they would enjoy just having to fight, would they not?
To all of the stuff used by the Spikies and the Scrawnies, their weapons are dainty little things that no self-respecting Ork would ever be caught dead wielding. Now, the only real issue that Orks have with Humie gear is that, quite frankly, it's boring. Humies are always unoriginal, and as a species, they fundamentally lack creativity. Their mech boys just don't have the pizzazz or flair of an Ork mech boy, and this leads to all of their equipment looking exactly the same, meaning that none of them can ever tell whose stuff belongs to who. If you were to throw a whole bunch of Ork guns into a pile, each of them would be able to tell immediately which one was theirs. Or
they got this shit customized. And it makes sense, right? You're excited to go to war. You're excited to like fight everything around you. Of course, it's like when you remember, oh my god, dude, I'm stuttering. Remember when you guys were in school and the next day there was like a trip and so you get really excited and you'll leave your clothes on your bed so you can wake up and put them on, and it's kind of like that. That's the vibe I'm getting. Custom gear with Orks, yeah. That's the kind of vibe I'm getting right now, is they're just really excited for it. They're just gonna have a great time.
At least, which one they liked better. And then they could probably bash the true owner's teeth in and take it for themselves. Now don't get me wrong, this isn't a deal breaker for the orcs when it comes to measuring up whether a species is a good enemy or not. In fact, Humi gear is their
Can we stop saying orcs? Orca!
favorite thing to loot aside from looting gear from other orcs. Humi gear is like a blank canvas that the orcs can put their magic on and make it proper orky. This normally takes the form of just gluing and welding a whole bunch of extra metal and scrap to them to make them extra killy. For example,
extra killy. They're so simple, I love that.
beaky power claws work pretty good. They're just unoriginal. They look like a big Humi hand and don't have, big metal claws on them like a proper power claw. But that's nothing that can't be fixed with a bit of orky ingenuity.
Yes. They like to DIY.
Okay, let's get into what everybody actually cares about. What do the orcs think of fighting against the Humies? How do they measure up when compared to every other species? Do the orcs love it or find them annoying? Are they the orcs' preferred enemy, or does that esteemed title go to a different faction? Honestly, fighting Humies is kind of a mixed bag for the orcs. They have some qualities that make them a great proper enemy, while other things, not so much. One-on-one, a Humie doesn't even come close to an orc. They're short, squishy, soft, and most of them are cowards, with, of course, the exception of Old Balon.
I feel like they just talked about me and I'm right here.
And the Beakies, they're proper hard. Humies are also just not really built for fighting. The orc's head is centered down low between their shoulders in the middle of their chest where they can keep it safe. But the Humies have their head on top of their shoulders, just waiting for it to get knocked off. That's why Humie dreadnoughts, knights, and titans look more like an orc than a Humie. If they were built like a Humie with their head on top of their shoulders, they would probably just wander around the battlefield all stupid-like until
all stupid, probably get strangled. Eva's secretly an orc, green skin and all. Yeah, you met me.
they got knocked over and killed. As I mentioned earlier in the video, Humie tech is not as good as orc tech. But the orcs will be the first to tell you that it's pretty damn efficient. It's good at killing, and at least most of their guns actually sound like proper Daka. Not that pew-pew stuff that the fish heads, the tinnies, and the scrawnies use. Or the gross squishy things that the bug eyes fight with that aren't even actually weapons. Also, Humies almost always understand proper fighting etiquette, a rarity in the grimdark future. They tend to show up to the fight with a whole lot of boys for the orcs to crump. This is a kindness and a showing of respect that is not lost on the orcs. It's real neighborly of them, and the lads appreciate it. Even if the orcs don't really differentiate much between all of the different Humie clans, they can at least recognize that certain groups of Humies utilize different tactics, strategies, and war machines, and that's something that the orcs appreciate. Every orc will tell you that variety is the spice of life when it comes to fighting, and the Humies, to their credit, do a pretty good job of always keeping things interesting. With them,
yeah, I guess like if it was the same shit, they would get really bored, which makes sense. Which does make sense. It was one of the things they were like, is that a fucking cross? I just noticed the cross. The fuck, bro? Anyways, yeah, it's like how they talked about the guns and the armor being too similar. Like it's the same shit. And they're like, man, you guys gotta be original. You gotta customize this shit.
never really know what you're gonna get. Even if some cowardly groups of Humies like to use long-range artillery to paste all the boys before the fighting even really gets started. That, admittedly, is something they find annoying. But even still, they recognize that this is only one Humie tactic, and having a whole lot of different ways to conduct a fight is an important trait.
Why are they holding out a cross like existence, bro? Bro, the power of the Lord compels you. Rah!
When measuring if someone's a good enemy or not.
Tin boys.
What about the Necrons, or the Tin Boys as the orcs call them? Are they as good of an enemy as the Humies? Well, they're certainly a lot tougher than Humies. Most of them can take a hit without even flinching. And the best part about the Tinnies is that when you're done
you can put them in rice. When you're done kicking their ass, you can put them in rice and go again.
all of them, they'll use their reanimation protocols, stitch themselves back together, and stand back up. Then the boys can kill them all over again. Any orc who's ever tried to do this with Humies will tell you that it's not nearly as fun. Now that being said, no enemy is truly perfect, and the Tin Boys do have a few flaws. Although their tenaciousness is greatly appreciated, fights against them can start to feel kinda samey after a while. It all starts to get a little bit dull. Most of the Tin Boys are mindless automatons that fight in complete silence. No war cries, no screams of pain, nothing to get the blood pumping. They just don't have the passion for fighting like orcs or even some Humies do. That being said, the Tinnies do have some pretty great tech to loot. Sure, their tanks might float around and their guns may not be very loud,
Floating tank? Diabolical.
but they're proper killy and can unleash some pretty hilariously devastating effects on the battlefield. The orcs will routinely do everything they can to try to loot them. Only problem is, most of the time, when they get into a fight with them, after they finish giving them a good kicking and the tins start to run for it, they and all of their equipment starts to fade out of existence, just completely disappearing and leaving no spoils for the boys, which is real sore loser behavior. This isn't exactly widespread information, but there are some orcs that know the secret, that the best way to start looting tinny gear is not to fight them, it's to sneak into their tombs while they're all still asleep. This is what the Death Skulls orcs of Wa Zort did a little while ago. Once they got inside, they proceeded to start looting like crazy, but their rambunctious enthusiasm unfortunately ended up triggering the tomb's reanimation protocol, and the boys soon found themselves surrounded by thousands of canoptic constructs. If far from being intimidated, the boys were absolutely delighted. They started scavenging and stealing like crazy and ended up using all of the Tin Boy gear to cobble together hordes of cyborgs and Morkanauts and ever more improbable super weapons.
They just DIY everything. I love that so much about
While
them.
also hijacking some Dolem gates to ferry in wave upon wave of reinforcements. By the time the fighting was done and Overlord Thamtak the Magnificent awoke to take command of his legions, he opened his eyes to the sight of an entire mob of leering mech boys standing over his sarcophagus, evil gleams in their eyes and revving power tools in their hands.
Fish boys.
And speaking of valuable tech and those who utilize it, the Tau, or the Fish Boys, have some of the fanciest tech worth looting.
Oh,
and
wow.
Their stuff is a bit easier to figure out than the Tin Boy machines. The orcs will routinely mock the Fish Boy weapons for not looking nor sounding like proper Daka, but none will argue their effectiveness.
It works, but like, where's the kaboom? Why sound like pew pew pew? I like the way they think.
This often makes them preferred raiding targets for the orcs from the Bad Moon clan. For example, there was a massive colony seeding ship originally known as the Hope's Light in their fishy language that was captured by Megaboss Mokrog and turned into his looted flagship, now appropriately renamed the Tau Killa. The boss has now been using this to wage unending war on the Kalshan Sept for about 200 years. So yeah, they've got some pretty good stuff to loot. But when it comes to fighting against the Fish Boys, it's ultimately a pretty frustrating affair for the orcs. You see, the thing about Fish Boys is they really don't like it when you hit them in the teeth with a choppa, so they'll do everything they can to put as much distance between themselves and the orcs as possible. This means that almost always, without fail, the boys will suffer unprecedented losses in the initial charge.
It's just long distance fighting. That's boring to them.
And will almost never get the satisfaction of a good old-fashioned brawl with an enemy that actually hits you back when fighting against them. Now, you would think this would be something that would either cause them to change up their tactics or lose interest in fighting them. But it's not like that at all. They just accept that this is part of the territory with the fishies. Sure, it's a bit annoying, but the delay just makes it all the more satisfying when you do finally get your hands on the gits. Plus, the initial losses just mean that there'll be more Fish Boys to crump for all the boys that do survive the charge.
I like how they don't hate anything, really. They're just like, unless they do, they kind of just like, oh, well, this kind of sucks, but you know, it's fine.
They might put too much focus in their Daka and negate the joy of variety in a fight. But at least the fishies seem enthusiastic and passionate about fighting in their own weird fishy way. The Scrawnies, on the other hand, well, let's get into it.
Oh no.
Scrawnies and Spikies, also known as the Aeldari and the Drukhari, are probably the most annoying of all enemies that the orcs routinely fight. Somehow, they manage to be even more cowardly than Humies, which in and of itself is at least impressive. For some reason that the orcs just can't wrap their heads around, the Scrawnies seem to be more afraid of dying than any other species in the entire galaxy. Something about some pink god, it doesn't matter. They don't pay too much attention to any gods that aren't Gork or Mork, as the rest of them are just a bunch of wimps not worth thinking about. Besides, every orc knows there's only two possible things that can happen when you die. Either nothing happens and then you're not bothered because there's nothing, or you go to the Great Green and meet Gork and Mork, who then subsequently reincarnate you back into the body of a new orc, so you can go back to fighting and do it all again. Death isn't something that the orcs are afraid of. I mean, it's something to be avoided if it can be helped, but being afraid of it just ain't logical. Also, all of the Scrawnies, be they pointy heads, clowns, or spikies, have this real undeserved arrogance about them that the orcs find off-putting. It's like they approach the galaxy as though it should automatically behave the way they want it to. and then they get very miffed when it routinely doesn't. Just like how the Humies do things the Orks find baffling, it's much the same way with the Scrawnies, but somehow even worse. At the end of the day, for as cowardly, weak, and oftentimes stupid as Humies is, they at least kinda sorta function in a vaguely similar manner to the Orks. They're just really bad at being Orks. But the
That's how they rate the fights. That's how they rate the people. It's based off of like how good you are at being an orc or how bad you are.
Scrawnies go one step further and do things that actively annoy them. They follow the same path as the Tin Boys and the Fish Heads, in that they make all of their trucks float around on grav lifts rather than—
Yeah, it has to be on the ground. You cowards, stop flying. It needs to be on the ground. It needs to be big and shiny with lots of metal around it. Okay, you gotta have flashing lights. What's this?
than being set on good old wheels and tracks. Also, if their guns do make any noise, it's all weird sounds that certainly aren't Daka. A proper gun should have enough recoil that it almost breaks your shoulder with every shot. But just like with other species, every orc that's ever fought against the Scrawnies and lived long enough to have another go knows that looks can be deceiving. Just like their owners, Scrawny guns are skinny, flimsy things that you could easily break over your knee without much effort. But they pack one hell of a punch. They may be weird and stupid looking, but at the end of the day, they're right killy. And from the orc's perspective, that's something you gotta respect. Now, that's mostly just in theory, because when the orcs do actually get to
A game theory? Sorry.
fight against the Scrawnies, and this goes doubly for the Spikies, it's almost never as fun as it should be. They almost exclusively fight with hit-and-run style tactics, striking from the shadows, and only getting stuck in a fight they're 100% sure them and their mates can win without getting hit back. Now sure, if a line of boys and a line of Scrawnies all charged at each other, both sides knew there was only one possible outcome, and it would involve the Scrawnies getting a good kicking. But Scrawnies didn't fight like orcs. They were always thinking about stuff. And the spiky ones had this—
And orcs don't think, they just act. I like that, I like that. And when they do think, it's not a lot.
annoying habit of laying traps to draw a couple of mobs off at a time and pick them off one by one, which was just rude. They didn't even give the rest of the boys a chance to get in on the scrap. Also, with the Spikies in particular, they have this weird fascination with fighting things that can't or won't fight back. This behavior is anathema to the orcs. It's the equivalent of shooting at rocks, which sure enough could be fun for at least a little while, but the point of the fight was the fight, where your blood was pumping and Gork and Mork were roaring in your ears. It's not fun unless the other git is looking to take your head off in return. Further, the Spikies seem to take pleasure in not just killing and fighting, but actively hurting their enemies, even after the fight is done. Sometimes they would even try to capture their enemies, avoiding the fight altogether, just so they could hurt them. Now, torture is something that orcs just can't wrap their heads around. Why would you waste time poking at your enemy like this when you could just move on to another one and keep fighting? No self-respecting orc would ever engage in torture, not even to their worst.
That's actually interesting. I didn't know that. I thought they would like violent stuff, but I guess, like, again, I guess it does make sense if you think of it like an orc. Where's the fighting, guys? Why is it organized? What the fuck?
The very idea makes them sick. Well, unless it was funny. Then they definitely would, and have many
Unless it was funny, I love them. Oh my god, I love them. The comment that said I can see Eve as an orc, 1000% correct. You're 1000% correct. The boys only want to battle. Yep.
Times in the past, but that's different. So the Scrawnies use tactics that aren't much fun to fight against, and since they're a dying species and all, there's not very many of them.
Torture is too intelligent for orcs. They're simple-minded. I really like it.
Both things that don't rank highly when it comes to traits of a good enemy. So is there anything redeeming about them at all? Well, kind of, at least to some orcs. When it comes to looting, as I mentioned before, the orcs find the aesthetics of scrawny weaponry to be pretty off-putting, but they do respect its power. Likewise, they're fascinated by scrawny armor, as even though it's no thicker than an orc's finger, it's capable of stopping a bullet or a choppa just as well as a hunk of steel as big as an orc's fist. It's way too small for the orcs to wear though, and even if they could fit into it,
it would be like a bikini for them. I think they should do it.
They know they'd be the laughingstock of their mates, so
Never
if
mind.
they do use it, they have to bash it into the shape of something that's at least not completely humiliating. The rest of the Scrawnies gear, though, has a bunch of weird properties, like the ability to make portals or make things float that have no business floating. This loot is highly sought after by the mech boys. who will often pay a pretty hefty price in teeth for whatever boy manages to bring some in, so it at least has value in that aspect. Now, the bug eyes, also known as the Tyranids, are probably about as far from scrawnies as you can get. Not only do they seem to love fighting, but there's an endless variety of different types of them.
Oh, I feel like these would be the favorites. So far, I feel like these are the favorite ones. There's different variety. They love fighting. What more can you ask for?
Not to mention the best part, there's a lot of them. They reproduce just as quickly, if not even faster than the orcs do. So when the boys find a planet currently being overrun by bug eyes, they know they're going to have more entertainment.
That's just heaven. That's heaven to them.
Than they know what to do with. There's just a couple of small issues when it comes to fighting them. First is that whereas the scrawnies think way too much, the bug eyes don't really think of much of anything at all. They're like big squigs in that regard to the orcs. The only thing they're concerned with is getting their teeth into their next meal. Now sure, sometimes they may look organized and like they're working together, but remember, looks can be deceiving. All the boys gotta do is pop one of the big brain-looking bug eyes, and the rest of them go absolutely nuts, which, in fairness, is always good for a laugh. The second issue that they have with them is that there's just not much they can loot from them. All of the bug eye weaponry isn't much use to an orc. They're all fleshy, rotting organs and not proper daka. Now that being said, their teeth, scything talons, and chitinous armor plating can be fashioned into some pretty good gear with a little orky ingenuity, but most orcs prefer metal equipment, something the bug eyes just can't offer them. Now, of course, fighting is what truly matters. No orc would argue against this, but looting is important too. If fighting was a cake, then looting would be the frosting, and everyone knows that cakes always taste better with frosting.
True!
Unless it's cheesecake, but I'm getting ahead of myself.
True!
I don't think there's a single orc out there that doesn't like fighting against the bug eyes, but some orcs like it way more than all the rest. The Snakebites, for example, a more primitive orc clan that follows what they call the old ways, enjoys the thrill of the hunt and routinely targets bug eyes and other big beasties as their preferred enemy type. There's actually one tribe of snakebite orcs in particular, known as the Worm Killers, that have taken this to an entirely different level. You see, at one point, this clan was fighting against the bug eyes in some jungle on a backwater world where they discovered a big fleshy bug eye spore. They brought it back to their fleet and cracked it open, and out came hundreds of tiny baby bug eyes that quickly ran off in every direction. They would soon find that these creatures grew really quickly, and they were delighted to find their cruiser in a very short period.
Oh my God. I'm so sorry. She's trying to jump up on me again.
Completely overrun with them. No sooner had they bashed one in than another would appear out of a vent or a drain. Now eventually, the cruiser was completely infested and became the mirror image of the Tyranid-infested jungle from before. The only orcs that ended up surviving were these snakebites, who had become absolute experts in hunting these beasties. Eventually, they managed to kill all of them, and when they met up with a bunch of other orcs, they were absolutely covered from head to toe in Tyranid trophies, and had taken on the name Worm Killers. This experience had been so much fun for them that they decided to hunt down more of those spore pods, which they would then subsequently bring to new worlds, pop them open on their surface, and then leave for a few years, only to return to a planet completely overrun by bug eyes.
That's crazy. They turned it into a sport.
It was perfect. Not only were all of the humies that lived on these worlds super mad, which the Worm Killers found really funny, but now they had a whole new planet of bug eyes to
No, they're just trolling these planets, bro. That's crazy.
Smash. Although exact numbers can't be confirmed, it's estimated that the Worm Killers have unleashed a bug-eye Armageddon on dozens of worlds, ensuring that they're never far away from a good fight. Now, the Beakies are probably the most classic and iconic of all of the orcs' enemies, and it's a huge reason why they enjoy fighting against the Humies so much. Pretty much every major weakness that the Humies have when it comes to being a proper enemy,
Beakies don't do that.
Have fixed. Humans by tradition are soft and cowardly, but Beakies are proper hard. In their armor, they're about on par with an orc in terms of size, durability, and strength. And maybe not a war boss or a knob, but at least a run-of-the-mill boy. They're also far more aggressive than regular Humies, and are not prone to streaks of cowardice. Honestly, the way the orcs see them, the Beakies are more like them than any other living creature in the entire galaxy. They're like kindred spirits, so to speak.
I love these memes, by the way.
Beakies understand that a fight is something you run towards and not away from. They're tough, strong, fast, and they'll keep fighting even after they've taken a good kicking. Not to mention,
Damn.
they've got good taste in
Oh.
both armor and daka. Their bolters are good and loud, just like the Orcs' guns, and their
Mm.
armor is much more well-made than all of that other Hume stuff, making it some of the Orcs' favorite equipment to loot. Now, it should come as no surprise that the Orcs have a lot of respect for them, but they're not perfect. First and foremost, there's not nearly enough of them. Somehow, they might even be rarer than the Scrawnies. And much to the Orcs' disappointment, most of the time when they go to fight the Humies, there isn't even a single Beaky to bash. Second, like I mentioned earlier in the video, the Orcs don't really understand the concept of hate. Anything they find annoying, they'll just fight. But the Beakies, on the other hand, seem to be entirely consumed by hatred for anything and everyone that isn't a Humie. Hatred drips out of every one of their pores and motivates every action they take and every decision they make. Now, sure, them being so hateful made them a bit more fun to fight, but some of the more thinky Orcs actually kinda pity them in a way, which is another emotion the Orcs aren't used to dealing with and they find it annoying. You see,
They're just like me.
are so consumed by hatred and an underlying bitterness that they're robbed of the joy they should be experiencing in a fight. It's like, dude, why are you so angry? We are actively engaged in the most fun thing you can possibly do. Fighting.
Yeah.
For the Orcs to think that you need to take a chill pill is at least some kind of accomplishment.
Oh.
Now, whereas the Orcs
Spikes.
don't really think much about the different chapters of Space Marines outside of the different color that they paint their armor, they do at least recognize that there's at least two different types of Beakies, because the Chaos lads with the spikes have a completely different group of mates they pal around with. Now, all Beakies are proper hard, don't get it twisted, but the Chaos Beakies bring a lot more variety to the table when getting stuck in. Whether they be the blue weird boy Beakies that cast all kinds of weird unnatural powers, the smelly green Beakies that know how to take a punch, the
Some smelly green peakies, bro. In the way the Orcs are talking right now.
strange pink Beakies that, if I'm just being honest, the Orcs find pretty weird, or their favorite, the red Beakies, that seem to love fighting almost as much as the Orcs do. The major issue with them, though, is that the Chaos lads with the spikes do a lot of weird stuff. Not only that, they often seem to have an agenda other than just fighting. In a lot of ways, they're more like regular Humies in that aspect and less like true Beakies, at least as far as the Orcs are concerned. When it comes to the Chaos Gods themselves, they're not really worth thinking about. Even though Khorne is absolutely obsessed with the Orcs, he finds them deeply fascinating and entertaining. No proper Orc would ever for a moment consider worshipping a puny Humie god. Gork and Mork were the only true gods any Orc would ever associate with. Now, all that being said, in their defense, the Chaos Boys are probably the kings of variety when it comes to fighting. You never really know what to expect with them, and thus their fights never get dull. When dealing with the warp and all of the strange, unnatural things that come out of it, things routinely get pretty weird to say the least. Especially when you're dealing with the Chaos Griblies, or the demons as the Humies call them. They can show up seemingly out of thin air when you're stuck in a fight with the Chaos lads, or even when you're out in the warp minding your own business. The Orcs view the demonic incursions of Griblies onto their ships as a good bit of sport, a fun way to pass the time on long
Pass the time.
journeys. And sure, Griblies are fun enough to fight, certainly is a nice change of pace between mutinies, but no matter how brutal and vicious they are, they're ultimately just not that satisfying to kill. When the Orcs crump them, they just dematerialize, disappearing as if they were made of smoke. Now, every Orc knows that the best part of the fight is when you lop off the enemy Git's head and all the blood goes gushing out. They never get that satisfying payoff with the Griblies, which ultimately just leaves them pretty pent up and frustrated. So most of the time, after they fight them, they just go back to
They just get edged. That's what it is. They're being edged. Fuck, I would hate that too.
fighting themselves.
Damn, imagine being called a pastime. Yeah. Was it just a pastime to you? You don't even know my name.
So the Chaos lads with the spikes have their place in the hierarchy of enemies, just like the Griblies and the rest of the species within the Milky Way. Unfortunately, though, there are some enemies that we know the Orcs get stuck in with pretty frequently that have yet to be written about from their perspective, so we can only really speculate on how they feel about them. Now, hopefully when Games Workshop decides to flesh out the Leagues of Votan, or the Stunties as they used to be called in old lore by the Orcs, we'll also get a few stories from the Orcs' perspective to see what they think about them. Likewise, the Custodians, who we can assume they would love because they're like bigger, harder beakies with way better gear to loot, would be right at the top of the list for the Orcs' preferred enemies. But as of the time of this recording, we haven't gotten a book that lets us see inside of their head while they're fighting against them. Which,
inside of their head, from what I've noticed, it's like static with occasional thoughts, and I like that. I like that a lot. They have dedicated sections of their brain that is like war, looting gear, exploding head. Those are the main ones. The rest is static, and I fucking love that.
is a real shame, and it's something I hope they correct in the future. But after all this, what do you guys think? Who do you think would be the Orcs' favorite enemy and why? Now personally, I'm leaning towards regular old Humies, as they've got the most history with them outside of the Necrons and the Eldar, but none of the boys.
I feel like the 9th Legion. They're a Legion, right? They'll be considered a Legion, not a fraction? Sorry, I'm still learning the differences. But yeah, the vampire motherfuckers. And again, those are the ones that anytime they're mentioned or shown, my heart just breaks, dude. They're the ones I have so much love for. Holy fuck. I feel like those would be ones they would like fighting because they're very, very, from what I know, after the death of, it breaks my heart just even talking about it. Why am I so emotionally invested already? Fuck. But I would say they might be the favorite to fight. Perhaps, mayhaps.
Boys today remember the war in heaven, and they don't keep written records. So from the modern Orcs perspective, Humies, or more specifically the Beakies, are the ones that check off the most boxes when it comes to traits a good enemy should have. If you like this video and you want to see more content like it, do me a favor and hit the like button, leave a comment, and maybe subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And share this with your friends. It helps me out a lot, and I really appreciate it. Also, sorry if I sound a little bit off in this video.
Don't worry about it.
A wicked bad flu, but it was the day I was supposed to record, so we're just making our way through it. Also, maybe check out the other videos I've got linked here in the end screen. I just recently made one on all of the differences between Psykers and Sorcerers, as most people incorrectly assume that they're the same thing. And I also made a how-to guide on how to properly summon a demon, at least in 40K. I had to dive into some pretty obscure source material for those two, so they're worth checking out if you like chaos lore. Anyways, as always, big thanks to everyone who supports all the work that I do.
Thank you.
Catch you all in the next
one. Thank you. I love orcs. I love them. Someone said I would be a very good orc, and I can see that. I can see that. Okay, bye. Whoa.